All right, so we've got a ton of info to get through today
Yeah.
about climate finance.
Yeah, looks like you've pulled reports from the World Resources Institute, the UN, the UNDP.
Exactly, and they're all looking at this idea of climate finance.
Like, where is the money going?
Where it needs to be going.
And what happens if we don't get it right?
Which is a pretty scary thought, honestly.
Yeah, no kidding.
So you seem really focused on the year 2025.
Oh, yeah, for sure. 2025 is going to be huge.
Huge year for climate action.
It is. Everyone's expecting countries to, like, really ramp up their pledges.
Yeah.
And then the big question is, how are they going to pay for it all?
Right, like how do you make those pledges a reality?
Exactly.
So that's what this deep dive is all about.
Okay, I like it.
We're going to figure out why this whole climate finance thing matters,
Okay.
where the gaps are,
Yeah.
and what solutions people are coming up with.
Cool.
But before we get into all of that,
Yeah.
can we even define climate finance?
Yeah.
Because it feels like such a buzzword.
It is a total buzz.
Everyone's saying it.
Right.
What does it actually mean?
So it's definitely more than just governments like handing out cash.
Okay.
It's more like this whole web of different ways to get funding to where it needs to go.
Right.
So you've got things like grants,
Right.
loans, bonds, carbon markets,
Uh,
even taxes. Like they're considering taxing things like flights.
Wait, taxes on flights.
Yeah.
That's a new one.
It is.
What's the thinking there?
So the idea is to make the industries that are contributing the most to climate change,
Okay.
to make them pay for it.
So the polluter pays kind of thing.
Exactly. The polluter pays principle.
Got it.
And actually, the International Maritime Organization is already considering putting a carbon levy on shipping.
Wow. Okay, so that's happening.
Yeah, it's gaining traction.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this climate finance stuff, it supports both reducing emissions,
Right.
like they call that mitigation, right?
Mitigation, yeah.
And then helping communities adapt to the impacts that are already happening.
Yeah, you got it.
So like both sides of
Yeah.
the problem. Exactly. And the articles you sent, they actually highlight this problem, that there's a huge imbalance.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Right now, everyone's focused on mitigation,
Okay.
but adaptation finance is way behind.
Which seems like a big problem because the people on the front lines of climate change,
Totally.
they need the most help.
Absolutely.
And they often don't have the resources to adapt.
Nope.
Like, it's almost like asking someone to run a marathon with a sprained ankle.
Yeah.
They need help to even get to the starting line.
100%.
It's not even about winning at that point.
No, it's about being able to participate.
Right.
And that brings us back to this $1.3 trillion question.
Okay, yeah, I saw that number.
That's the estimated annual funding needed by 2035
Okay.
for developing nations to switch to clean energy and adapt to climate change.
So that's the target.
That's the target.
But where's the money actually going right now?
Right.
And more importantly, where is it not going?
yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
$1 trillion question.
Yeah, trillion.
So where are we at?
So we're seeing a lot of investment in renewable energy projects,
Okay.
especially in developed countries.
Uh-huh.
But things like building seawalls or developing drought-resistant crops.
Yeah.
Or moving communities away from vulnerable coastlines.
Like actual adaptation stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's severely lacking.
It sounds like we need to like zoom in and see what's happening on the ground to really understand this.
Absolutely.
One of the places that the articles mentioned was St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Yeah. So imagine your home just ravaged by a Category 5 hurricane.
Oh, gosh.
That's the reality for these island nations.
Right.
And then they have to rebuild.
Yeah.
And that often means going deeper into debt.
It's like a terrible cycle.
It is a vicious cycle.
So how can adaptation finance help break that cycle in a place like St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
So for island nations, one of the most important things is building resilient infrastructure.
Okay.
So think like reinforced buildings that can withstand high winds, elevated roads that won't flood as easily,
Got it.
improved water storage systems to deal with drought.
So it's not just about rebuilding what was lost.
No,
It's about rebuilding better.
exactly. Building back better and stronger.
I like that.
Yeah.
What else?
Adaptation finance could also support early warning systems for extreme weather.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. So people have more time to prepare and evacuate.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And it could help fund things like restoring coastal mangroves.
Which protect against storm surges, right?
Exactly. They're like natural buffers.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So there are a lot of options.
Okay, those are some really tangible solutions.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay, where are we going?
Let's go to South Africa,
Okay, cool.
another spot highlighted in the articles.
Uh-huh.
They're making a big push to move away from coal
Yeah.
and switch to renewables.
Which sounds great.
Yeah, on paper it does.
Right.
But what about the workers who lose their jobs in the process?
That's a great point.
Like, what happens to them?
The articles actually mention this town, Komati,
Uh-huh.
where they recently shut down a coal-fired power station.
Okay.
And it just highlights how complicated this transition really is.
Socially and economically.
Absolutely.
So how can climate finance help ensure a just transition for
Yeah.
these workers and communities?
So retraining programs are huge,
Okay.
like teaching people the skills they need for jobs in renewable energy.
Makes sense.
And climate finance could also help develop new industries in those regions.
Okay. So kind of diversify the economy.
Exactly.
So no one's left behind.
Right.
But this brings us to like a much bigger challenge.
Yeah.
How do we get all the money we need?
Right. We're talking trillions of dollars.
And governments can't do it alone.
Definitely not. They need help.
The articles talked about unlocking private capital.
Yes.
In fact, they said half of that 1.3 trillion
Yeah.
is supposed to come from the private sector.
That's ambitious.
It is. How do you get investors to put their money into climate solutions?
Right.
Especially in developing countries where it might seem riskier.
Yeah. That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So the articles talk about all these new financial tools
Okay, let's hear it.
that are designed to do just that.
Awesome.
One that's getting a lot of attention is green bonds.
Green bonds.
Yeah, basically they're bonds issued by companies or governments
Uh-huh.
specifically to raise money for like environmentally friendly projects.
Okay, so instead of my money going towards like a new oil pipeline,
Right.
it would
Yeah.
go towards building a wind farm.
Exactly. Or like developing drought-resistant crops.
Cool.
And the cool thing is green bonds often come with tax breaks or other benefits for investors.
Oh, so it's like a win-win.
Yeah, exactly.
You get to do good and maybe get a little extra back.
Makes sense.
So the market for these has grown a lot, right?
Oh, yeah. It's exploded in recent years.
But there's still more potential there.
Tons.
Okay, cool. What else is in this toolbox of yours?
Well, there's this thing called debt for nature swaps.
Debt for nature swaps.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool concept.
Tell me more. I'm intrigued.
So imagine a developing country
Okay.
that has a ton of debt,
Uh-huh.
and then a wealthy nation or institution comes along and says, hey,
Yeah?
we'll forgive some of your debt
Uh,
if you promise to use that money for conservation efforts.
oh, so it's like a win-win.
Exactly. They get debt relief,
Okay. Yeah.
and the planet gets protected.
I remember the article mentioned Ecuador doing this to protect the Galapagos Islands.
Yes, exactly. That's a great example.
That's amazing.
And there's growing interest in using these swaps to protect like rainforests,
Uh-huh.
coral reefs, and other important ecosystems.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got green bonds.
Yep.
Debt for nature swaps.
Uh-huh.
What about this tropical forest forever facility thing?
Oh, yeah, that one's a big one.
It sounds like a huge deal.
It is, the idea is to create this massive global fund.
Okay.
We're talking like $125 billion
Wow.
to help countries protect their forests.
And it's a mix of public and private funding, right?
Yeah, exactly, like a giant partnership for forests.
I like it.
And what's really interesting is that investors would actually get a financial return after 20 years.
So it's not just a donation.
No, it's an investment.
So it's like we're finally starting to recognize the true value of forests.
Yeah, instead of just seeing them as like timber or farmland,
Right.
we're seeing them as carbon sinks and biodiversity hotspots.
Yeah, like essential for the planet.
Exactly.
This tropical forest forever facility thing sounds like it could be a game changer.
It really could.
Okay, so we've got all these cool ideas out there,
Yeah.
but are there any like policy changes
Mhm.
that could help make this all happen?
Yeah, for sure. There are a few things that could really move the needle.
Like what?
So the articles mentioned things like China's green industrial policy,
Okay.
the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act,
Uh-huh.
and India's expanding their clean energy efforts.
Those are all good signs. Right?
Yeah, they're all positive
we're-
examples because they show that governments are serious about this transition.
So it's about sending the right signals.
Exactly, giving investors that confidence to invest.
Makes sense, but I'm sure there are still concerns about investing in developing countries.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What can be done to address those?
So one idea that's gaining traction is setting up these things called country platforms.
Country platforms, what are those?
Basically, they're initiatives led by the countries themselves
Okay.
that bring together the government, investors, and other stakeholders to identify and develop investment-ready projects.
So it's about making the process smoother.
Exactly, cutting through the red tape
Yeah.
so investors can easily find and fund projects that meet everyone's needs.
Okay, so Colombia's already doing this.
Yeah, they recently launched a country platform.
Interesting.
It'll be interesting to see if others follow suit.
Yeah.
because it could really unlock a lot of private capital.
It sounds promising.
It does.
What about this whole ESG investing debate?
Oh, yeah. ESG, that's a big one.
Does that play into all of this?
Absolutely.
Remind me what ESG stands for again.
Environmental, social, and governance.
Right, right.
And it's become huge in the investment world.
So it's not just about profits anymore, it's
Yeah.
about the impact those investments have.
Exactly, like on the planet and on society.
And there's been some pushback against it, right?
There has, especially in the U.S.
But it seems like it's here to stay.
Yeah, the momentum is definitely building.
More and more companies are setting these net zero goals
For sure.
and being transparent about their climate risks.
It's becoming the norm.
It feels like there's a growing awareness that sustainability is good for business.
Absolutely. It's not just the right thing to do.
Right.
It's also smart business.
Okay, so we've talked about mitigation and adaptation. But there's another piece of this puzzle that we need to talk about. Nature.
Yes. Nature is key.
Like, we can't talk about climate change without talking about protecting nature, right?
Exactly. Healthy ecosystems are essential.
Forests, oceans, soils.
Yeah, they absorb carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
And provide so many other benefits.
But one of the articles pointed out something pretty concerning,
What's that?
that we're still destroying nature faster than we're protecting it.
Yeah, that's a problem.
It's like we haven't fully grasped how important it is.
I know, it's frustrating.
But the articles also talked about how creative finance can help turn things around.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We already talked about debt for nature swaps. But what else is being done to fund nature's future?
Well, there's the Tropical Forest Forever facility, which we talked about.
Right, that's a big one.
Yeah, but there are other cool approaches, too.
Like what?
So, for example, they're setting up land banks.
Land banks.
Yeah, to buy and protect ecologically important areas.
So instead of turning them into farms or developments,
Right.
we're keeping them wild.
Exactly. Preserving their biodiversity and their ability to store carbon.
That's awesome.
What else?
Carbon markets are another interesting area.
Carbon markets. How do those work?
Sure.
So companies can basically offset their emissions
Okay.
by investing in projects that reduce or remove carbon from the atmosphere.
So, like, if a company can't completely eliminate its emissions,
Yeah,
it can invest in a reforestation project somewhere else to
exactly.
balance things out.
Right.
Interesting.
And while carbon markets have their challenges,
I'm sure.
they have huge potential to fund nature-based solutions.
So it's like putting a price on nature services.
In a way, yeah,
It's really cool to see this shift
I agree.
towards recognizing the importance of nature.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's not just about the money, right?
No, definitely
It's about recognizing that we're all connected
not. Absolutely, we're part of nature, not separate from it.
and that protecting nature is protecting ourselves.
100%.
It's like a fundamental shift in how we see the world.
It really is. And that brings us back to why we're doing this deep dive,
Yeah.
to help you understand this complex issue.
Right.
And hopefully feel empowered to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
It feels like we've uncovered so many different solutions here,
Yeah, we have.
each with its own, like, quirks and challenges.
Uh-huh.
But is there a risk that all these different pieces become too fragmented?
That's a really good point.
Like, how do we make sure it all works together?
So that's exactly what Ani Desgupta from the World Resources Institute was talking about.
Okay.
We need a more holistic approach.
Holistic. Okay.
Yeah, right now there are separate systems for mitigation, adaptation, nature conservation, and they're not always talking to each other.
It's like different departments in a company,
Yeah, exactly.
all working in silos.
Right, each one focused on their own little thing.
And not seeing the big picture.
Exactly.
So how do we fix that?
Just like in a company, you need strong leadership.
Okay.
You need someone at the top to bring everyone together.
So we need like a CEO of climate finance.
Basically, yeah.
And Desgupta thinks finance ministers and even heads of state need to be involved.
Oh, for sure. They need to be driving this.
So 2025 is going to be a big year for diplomacy and negotiations then.
Oh, yeah. Huge year.
We've got the UN Climate Summit, the G20 meetings.
All eyes are going to be on those events.
It feels like the stakes are so high,
They are.
but there's also this sense of momentum.
Yeah, there's a real energy around this right now.
Like, if we can get this right,
Uh-huh.
it could unlock so much investment
Totally.
in a better future.
A more just and sustainable future.
Exactly.
And it's not just about governments and institutions either.
Right. This affects everyone.
Everyone. The decisions made in 2025 will impact businesses, investors, communities, individuals.
All over the world.
Yeah, this is a global issue.
So what does this all mean for our listener?
Right.
Climate finance might seem complicated,
Uh-huh.
but it's really about the kind of world we want to live in.
It's about our values.
And the legacy we leave for future generations.
Exactly. The choices we make today will determine what that future looks like.
And 2025 is a pivotal year.
It is a make or break moment.
So let's recap. We've talked about the different sources of climate finance, from government funding and taxes to private investments and these creative mechanisms.
Yep. We've covered a lot of ground.
We've seen how this money can support both mitigation and adaptation.
Right, reducing emissions and helping communities adapt.
And we talk about how crucial it is to protect nature.
Nature is key.
But as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I keep coming back to this idea.
What's that?
That it's not just about the money.
It's about so much more.
It's about changing how we think.
Yeah, like fundamentally changing our mindset.
Recognizing that the economy and the planet are connected.
We can't separate them.
It's about seeing climate action as an investment.
Not a cost.
An investment in a healthier, more prosperous future.
Absolute.
And that future starts now.
It does. And thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of climate finance.
We hope you learned something.
And that you feel inspired to take action.
Because at the end of the day, it's up to all of us to create the future we want.
That's a great message to end on.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.